Oruta, he whispered to the second the name of the second wife. So full of life you were. I took that life for myself. It has served me well. Your debt to your king is paid. He chuckled softly, a chilling sound in the lonely chamber. Tears pricked at Akune's eyes as anger and disgust swelled within her. She clamped a hand over her mouth to keep any sound from escaping. He killed them, her mind screamed. It was not a curse from some ghost or god. It was him all along. The sun hung low over the ancient kingdom of Obinikba, casting long golden rays across the thatched huts and red earth. A hush had fallen over the land. In the marketplace, women who normally chattered and laughed now spoke in whispers. Men gathered in uneasy clusters, their faces drawn with worry. The cause of their fear loomed larger than any invading army or famine. It was the fate of their king's brides. King Omekabu of Obinikpa was a ruler of great renown. Under his reign, the kingdom had prospered in trade and harvest. By all appearances, he was wise and strong, but a dark shadow clung to his household. In the past 5 years, 3 queens had married King Omekago, and 3 queens had died under mysterious circumstances. Each death came suddenly and without clear cause. These tragedies gave birth to rumors of a curse. People said that the throne of Obinikpa was cursed, that any woman who became Omekagu's wife was doomed to die. With each death, fear spread wider across the villages. Mothers held their daughters close at night, praying that none would be chosen as the next queen. Young women whispered prayers to be passed over by fate's hand. No woman in the kingdom wanted to become the bride of King Omekagu now, no matter his wealth or power. Better a simple life than a short life as queen, they said. Yet the law of the land could not be refused. The king must have a queen by ancient custom, and when the time came to choose, someone would have to go. In the small village of Nkata, on the outskirts of Obinikba, lived a maiden named Akun. She was known across the village for her gentle heart and remarkable beauty. Akune's skin was the rich brown of the riverbank clay, and her eyes shone with warmth and intelligence. Many said she was as lovely as a moonlit night. Her name meant mother's wealth, for she was a precious blessing to her family. Despite her grace, Akun was no delicate flower. She was hardworking, humble, and surprisingly brave. She helped her parents in the yam fields every day and told stories to the children by the fireside every evening. One evening, Akun returned from the field to find her parents and neighbors gathered anxiously around the village square. The air was thick with tension. She saw her father, Okeke, a sturdy farmer with kind but worried eyes, standing with arms crossed. Her mother, Ezine, wrung her hands beside him. "What is wrong?" Akun asked quietly as she joined them. Her father sighed deeply. "The elders have received word from the capital. King Omekagu will choose a new bride at the next full moon," he said. A ripple of dread passed through the small crowd. Akune's heart skipped a beat. She knew what it meant. The law was clear. When a king's throne was without a queen, each province of the kingdom had to present a candidate. And with the full moon only a week away, every maiden of age in Obinikpa was a potential candidate, including her. A murmur rose among the villagers. Who will it be this time? How can we send one of our daughters to her death? Maybe the curse will be broken, or maybe not, someone else muttered. Akun lifted her chin. Fear fluttered in her belly, but she kept her voice steady. "We all know our duty," she said, looking around her friends and neighbors. "The king must choose a wife. If one of us is chosen, we must go." Her words were met with astonished looks. Many could not believe she spoke so calmly of a fate so grim. Her mother grabbed her arm, eyes full of worry. "Hush, Akun, don't even say such a thing," Ezine begged. "We will pray they do not choose you. Perhaps no one from our village will be chosen at all." But Akun gently placed her hand over her mother. "Mama, if the king's messengers come here, they will not leave empty-handed. Would we rather they take someone else's daughter?" she asked softly. She did not say aloud the thought that followed in her mind. If a curse truly hangs over the king's brides, perhaps it is time someone faced it openly. Okeke frowned and put a protective arm around Akune's shoulders. Bravery is one thing, my child, but this, he trailed off, unable to finish. He had heard the horrible stories like everyone else. Queen after queen, dead. Some said the first queen had simply not woken up one morning. The second collapsed during a midday meal, gone before the royal physician arrived. The third, barely a year ago, fell ill with a mysterious sickness that no healer could cure. Each time, King Omekagu had mourned publicly, declared weeks of mourning, and then eventually the whispers began anew that a new bride must be found. Ezine's voice trembled as she spoke. What if it is not a curse? What if an evil spirit truly haunts the palace, or an enemy's poison? Like many others, she sought any explanation that might make sense. It was easier to blame angry spirits or hidden enemies than to accept that fate could be so cruel. An elderly man, Panuosu, who sat on a wooden stool nearby, tapped his walking stick on the ground. "It is a curse, I tell you," he said with certainty. His eyes were clouded with age and sadness. "A curse on the king's palace. I have seen something like this before in my youth in a faraway land. The spirit of the land will not accept any woman on that throne. The king should rule alone or give up the throne." Others murmured in agreement, or at least did not challenge the old man's pronouncement. Fear made them believe in any rumor. Akune listened quietly. She respected the elders, but something in her heart did not accept that explanation completely. Why would a curse specifically kill only the queens? King Omekagu himself appeared unharmed, continuing his reign with all his strength and vitality. If an evil spirit or offended deity wanted to punish the kingdom, would it not strike the king as well? The pattern was too strange. Night fell and the villagers drifted to their homes. That night, Akune lay on her sleeping mat but found little rest. She stared at the thatched roof, thinking of the fate that might await her or another innocent girl. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel a sliver of fear. She imagined the grand stone walls of the palace closing around her like a tomb. She pictured a faceless queen gasping for breath as life left her body without explanation. Akune's hand clenched the thin blanket beneath her. "No," she whispered into the darkness, as if to ward off the chilling images. She would not be afraid of shadows and rumors. If I am chosen, I will face whatever comes. Across Obinikba, similar scenes played out in many homes. In one hut, a father hid his beautiful daughter in a secret cellar, hoping the king's men would forget she existed. In another, a girl tried to mar her looks by cutting her hair short so she might not catch the royal eye. Fear was everywhere, driving people to desperate measures. But in Nkata village, Akune's family made no such plans to hide or disguise their daughter. Okeke could never lie to the king's emissaries, and Ezine knew fate could not be outwitted by tricks. They simply prayed for mercy and watched the moon's phases anxiously. Each night, the moon grew, its silver light stronger, a reminder that the fateful day drew near. Finally, the full moon arrived. It was a bright, clear night, and its round form hung like a lantern in the sky. On this night, King Omekagu's representatives would travel to villages across the kingdom to announce which maiden had been chosen from each region. By tradition, each province's elders submitted the name of one eligible maiden to the royal court earlier in the week. No one in Nkata knew whose name their provincial elders had put forward. It had been a tense, secretive process. No family wanted to volunteer their daughter, so the elders had deliberated behind closed doors, perhaps drawing lots. Akune's family sat around a small fire in their compound that evening, waiting. No one had an appetite for dinner. Ezine quietly recited prayers under her breath as she stirred the embers. Okeke sharpened his machete with quick nervous strokes, though there was no work to do that night. He just needed something to occupy his hands. Akune sat straight-backed, watching the gate. Her heart pounded, but she kept her face serene. At last, the sound of horse hooves echoed outside the compound. A young boy ran through the village pathways, shouting, "They are here! The king's men are here!" All across Nkata, doors creaked open as families emerged holding lanterns. Akune and her parents stood as two royal messengers rode into the center of the village on brown horses. The messengers wore the king's colors, rich purple wrappers and leather sandals, and each bore a long spear adorned with feathers. One of them unrolled a scroll and by the flicker of torchlight began to read in a loud, formal voice. In the name of His Royal Highness King Omekagu of Obinikba, we come to announce the chosen bride from the province of Udi. Nkata village was in Udi province, and every person present held their breath. The messenger continued, "By the wisdom of the elders and the laws of our fathers, the maiden selected to wed the king is..." He paused for a moment, his eyes scanning the crowd. Akune felt a strange calm wash over her. Her mother squeezed her hand tightly. She could feel her Ezine trembling. The pause seemed to stretch forever. Finally, the messenger's voice rang out clearly. "Akune, daughter of Okeke." A collective gasp arose. Ezine nearly collapsed, and Okeke quickly steadied her wife, though his own eyes were wide with shock. Murmurs surged through the aided villagers. Some looked at Akune with pity, others with a sad relief that their own daughters' names had not been called. Akune herself felt as if she was outside her body, watching this happen from a faraway land. But she stepped forward gently. "I am here," she said, her voice as steady as she could make it. The second messenger dismounted and approached her. He produced a small ivory carving in the shape of a kola nut, the king's token of engagement, and placed it in Akune's hand. "The king summons you to the palace, Akune. In 3 days' time, you shall be wed and crowned queen of Obinikba." Akune closed her fingers around the cool ivory token. The reality settled on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. She bowed her head. "I accept," she answered softly. Behind her, she heard her mother stifle a sob. Her father's hand found her shoulder, squeezing it with a mix of pride and dread. He wanted to say something, but words failed him. The head of the village, an elder named Ozene, stepped forward then. Even he looked pained by the duty he had to perform. "We, the people of Nkata, will comply with the king's order," he said hoarsely. "Our hearts are heavy, but we will not defy the law or our king. We wish Akune a safe journey and pray the curse will be lifted." Some villagers nodded and murmured agreement. The messengers gave a curt nod, satisfied that there would be no resistance here. "At first light tomorrow, we will return to escort the maiden to the capital," the lead messenger announced. "Be prepared." With that, the king's men remounted their horses and rode off into the night to announce the next province's chosen bride. The villagers of Nkata gradually dispersed, some stopping to touch Akune's shoulder or offer a hushed blessing as they passed. Most did not know what to say. What comfort could they give? Akune tried to give them reassuring smiles in return. Soon, only Akune and her parents remained by the dying fire. Ezine broke down in tears at last, throwing her arms around her daughter. "My child, my precious child, why did it have to be you?" Okeke's eyes were wet too, though he fought to remain composed. He put one arm around his wife and one around Akune. In a low voice he said, "Akune, you are brave and good. Perhaps the gods chose you for a reason, maybe to end this nightmare for all of us." He swallowed hard. "But remember, you are not going into that palace alone. The spirits of our ancestors will watch over you. Your father's spirit, your mother's spirit," his voice cracked. "We will be with you in heart." Akune hugged her parents tightly. She had never been farther from home than the neighboring village, and now she was to travel to the royal palace and face an uncertain, possibly deadly future. Yet in that moment, she felt strangely steady. Her own fear was there, yes, fluttering in her chest, but it was overshadowed by determination. "I will be all right, Mama. Papa, do not fear," she said quietly, wiping her mother's tears. "Whatever lies ahead, I will meet it with courage and truth, I promise." Mother and father nodded, trying to believe. Under the cold light of the full moon, Akune packed her few belongings late into the night, her mind racing with questions. Is the curse real? If it is, who or what truly causes it? She thought of the 3 queens who came before her, women she had never known, but whose fate now loomed over hers. I will not end up like them, she whispered to herself in the darkness. I will find out the truth, whatever it may be. Thus, with a mix of fear and fierce resolve, Akun prepared to leave the only home she had ever known. In her heart, a quiet flame of courage flickered to life, determined to withstand the shadow of the curse that hung over King Omekagu's throne. Dawn broke with a pale light as Nkata village prepared to bid farewell to Akun. The roosters had only just crowed when the king's messengers returned, accompanied by a small escort of royal guards. A modest wooden cart had been provided to carry Akun's belongings and to ease her journey. Akun emerged from her family hut dressed in a simple blue linen wrapper, her head held high despite the sorrow in her eyes. She had hardly slept, but she showed no sign of weakness as she stepped forward into the cool morning air. Her mother, Ezine, walked by her side clutching a small bundle of food for the trip. Her father, Okeke, carried a woven basket containing gifts for the king, offerings of yams, dried fish and kola nuts from their village, as tradition demanded, when presenting a bride. A few villagers had also gathered quietly to see Akun off. They looked on with a mixture of respect and heartbreak, whispering among themselves. Elder Ogone was already speaking with the head messenger at the village outskirts. As Akun and her parents approached, Ogone turned to them. The old man's face was grave but resolute. Child, he addressed Akun, I will accompany you to the royal palace. It is the duty of our province to ensure you are presented properly to the king. He managed a weak smile meant to be encouraging. You will not be alone on the road. Akun bowed her head slightly. Thank you, Father Ogone, she replied politely, using the respectful term for the elder. She was grateful. Having a familiar face on this journey, even one as stern as Ogone's, was a comfort. The time for parting came. Ezine could no longer hold back her tears. She embraced Akun fiercely. Remember everything we taught you, she whispered, voice breaking. Be respectful, be wise, and please stay safe. Okeke enveloped both wife and daughter in his strong arms. He had said his goodbyes in private earlier, but now he simply murmured, Go with our love, Akun. May the gods protect you. Akun fought the sting of tears in her own eyes. If she cried now, her mother would only be more upset. So she swallowed the lump in her throat and mustered a smile. I will make you proud, she said softly. She gently separated from her parents' embrace and climbed onto the waiting cart. The messenger took the reins and with a soft flick, the ox that was hitched to the cart began to pull. The wooden wheels creaked into motion. As the cart rolled forward, Akun turned to look back. She saw her mother sink to her knees, sobbing into Okeke's shoulder. Her father raised a hand in farewell, his face glistening with tears he could no longer hide. Akun raised her hand in return and kept her eyes on her parents until the cart rounded a bend and they faded from view. A heavy ache settled in her chest, but she set her jaw and faced forward. There was no turning back now. Elder Ogone walked alongside the cart, leaning on his walking stick, but keeping a brisk pace. The king's guards and messengers led the way, their spears glinting in the morning sun. A few other villagers followed for a short distance, but one by one they peeled away, returning to their daily lives, which would never be the same. Before long, Akun found herself truly leaving behind the familiar fields and clay huts of Nkata. They traveled along a narrow dirt road that cut through thick forests and rolled over gentle hills. The morning air was cool and filled with the sounds of birdsong. Normally, Akun would have enjoyed a journey through such beautiful countryside, but today her mind was too clouded with worries. She thought about the palace that awaited her, a place she had only heard of in stories. Some said the king's palace in Obinikpa town was as large as 10 villages, with high walls of stone and great wooden gates. Akun had heard about the king's throne room with its carved pillars and the royal compound filled with many houses for servants and officials. She tried to imagine it all and felt a flutter of nervous excitement mixed with dread. As midday approached, the small party stopped to rest under a large udala fruit tree by the roadside. The ox was unhitched for a while to graze, and one of the guards offered Akun a gourd of cool water. She thanked him quietly and drank. Elder Ogone sat on a fallen log stretching his legs. He had been quiet most of the journey, but now he cleared his throat. Akun, Ogone began, you must remember everything you see and hear at the palace. Observe closely and speak little at first. The court can be complicated. His tone was gentle with concern. Akun nodded. I understand. I will do my best to honor our people, she replied. Ogone managed a tight smile. He hesitated, then continued in a lower voice. There will be those who might talk about the curse. Servants, maybe even officials. You must be careful not to engage in such talk publicly. It could anger the king or bring shame. Just keep your ears open. At the mention of the curse, one of the younger guards nearby made a subtle sign against evil behind Ogone's back. Clearly, even these escorts were nervous about it. Akun noticed but pretended not to. She spoke softly. Elder, do you believe the curse is real? Ogone looked away for a moment, following the flight of a sparrow above. His lined face creased further. I do not know, he admitted, but I have lived long enough to see that sometimes misfortune follows misfortune without any explanation. Whether it is a curse of spirits or the will of fate, who can say? We only know what has happened. He sighed. I pray that you will be the one to break this chain of tragedy, my child. Be strong, and perhaps the gods will smile on you. Akun absorbed his words silently. She had hoped for more certainty from the elder, some reassurance that maybe everything would be all right. But Ojeni himself was clearly frightened for her. Still, he had said perhaps she could break the chain of tragedy. That meant he thought it was possible at least. After the short rest, the group continued on. By late afternoon, the dusty road widened and began to show more signs of life. They passed other travelers now, traders with carts of goods, women carrying clay water pots on their heads, children herding goats. As they neared the heart of the kingdom, the landscape became more cultivated, wide fields of millet and cassava, and groves of palm trees. Soon, Akun saw the outlines of larger buildings ahead and heard the distant buzz of many voices. They were approaching Obinikpa, the capital town. Her stomach flipped with nerves. The road ahead climbed a gentle slope, at the top of which stood the fabled walls of the king's palace compound. The palace wall was made of reddish-brown clay bricks and stood taller than any structure Akun had ever seen. Sharp wooden stakes jutted from the top of the wall, and 2 watchtowers flanked a heavy gate of dark Iroko wood. As they arrived at the gate, the royal escorts announced themselves. Open for the bride of the king, one shouted up to the guards on the tower. Akun's heart thudded at those words. The bride of the king. The reality of it washed over her anew. She was about to enter the king's domain as his chosen queen. She clasped her hands tightly in her lap as the great wooden gates groaned open. They entered into a broad courtyard bustling with activity. Palace servants in brown tunics hurried about on errands. Soldiers in polished helmets stood guard. In the center of the courtyard was a grand old udala tree, and beneath it a few elderly men sat playing a board game on the ground, likely councillors or lesser chiefs waiting to be called for an audience. Beyond the courtyard, Akun glimpsed several impressive buildings. One that looked like a long hall, perhaps the royal kitchens or barracks, and another with ornate carvings that might be the royal storeroom. But dominating them all was the king's palace itself, a large structure of clay and stone, adorned with intricate patterns painted in white and black. Its roof was steep and covered in baked clay tiles rather than thatch, a sign of wealth. As Akune carefully stepped down from the cart, a short, round-faced man in elegant robes approached. He wore a bright red cap, the mark of a titled chief, and gold bracelets on his wrists. He gave Akune a polite bow. "Welcome to the royal palace of Obinikpa, maid in Akune," he said in a high, formal voice. "I am Chief Ume, the king's chamberlain. I oversee the household and servants. We have been expecting you." Akune returned the bow with respect, remembering Elder Ojune's advice to be observant and humble. "Thank you, Chief Ume," she said softly. She took a steadying breath, trying to remain calm as curiosity and anxiety warred within her. Chief Ume then greeted Elder Ojune with a nod. Ojune cleared his throat and spoke up. "I have accompanied the maiden to deliver her safely and formally, as is our custom. Now that she is here, I would request an audience to present her to His Highness King Omekagu." The chamberlain pursed his lips in a courteous smile. "His Highness has been informed of your arrival, and he awaits in the throne hall to receive you both." He turned, beckoning. "Please follow me." Akune and Ojene followed Chief Ume across the courtyard. Akune's eyes darted around, taking in every detail. She noticed that some of the servants paused in their tasks to sneak quick glances at her. Their expressions held pity and guarded hope. One young palace maid carrying a basket of vegetables actually made a subtle sign of blessing with her fingers as Akune passed, as if warding off evil for her. Akune felt a swell of gratitude and sadness. They all expect me to die like the others, yet they still hope I might be different. Her resolve hardened further. She straightened her back and looked ahead as she entered the main palace building through a tall archway of carved wood. Inside, the cool air of the palace was scented with burning frankincense. They walked through a wide corridor decorated with colorful murals of past kings and queens of Obinikpa. Akune couldn't help but wonder which of those painted queens had suffered the fate now awaiting her. She silently prayed, "Ancestors, guide me." At last, they reached the throne hall. Two guards pushed open a pair of elaborately carved double doors. The hall beyond was breathtaking. The floor was red clay polished to a sheen. Tall pillars lined the sides, each engraved with images of leopards and eagles. At the far end, on a raised dais, stood the king's throne, a grand chair made of dark wood and ivory inlay draped with lion skins. And seated on the throne was King Omekagu himself. Akune's first sight of her future husband filled her with a confusing mix of emotions. Omekagu was a striking figure. He appeared to be in the prime of his life, perhaps around 40 years old, though his true age was whispered to be much more. He was clad in a rich indigo robe and wore a heavy bead necklace that rested on his broad chest. A gold crown with a single eagle feather sat upon his head. His skin was the color of midnight, and his eyes were dark and keen as they fixed upon Akune. Omekagu rose from his throne as they approached, which Akune knew was a gracious gesture. Kings did not always stand for anyone. Her heart pounded as she moved closer, and then she sank into a low curtsy, bowing her head respectfully. Elder Ogeni also prostrated himself briefly in salute. The king's voice echoed in the hall, deep and resonant. "Rise, elder. Rise, my bride," he said. Akune stood up straight, but kept her eyes lowered politely. King Omekagu stepped down from the dais and approached her. Gently, he placed a finger under her chin and lifted her face to look at him. His touch was light, but it sent a slight chill through Akune. She met his gaze. His eyes bored into hers. They were commanding, intelligent eyes, but she thought she glimpsed something else within them, a hardness or hunger that made her uneasy for a heartbeat. Still, the king smiled. It was a warm smile that would reassure any onlooker. "Akune," he said, pronouncing her name carefully, "you are even more beautiful than I was told. Welcome to my home. I trust your journey was comfortable?" "It was, Your Highness. Thank you," Akune replied softly. Omekagu nodded in approval at her manners. Then he addressed Elder Ogeni. We thank the elders of Udi province for bringing forth such a fine bride. Rest assured, Elder, she will be treated with the honor and care due a queen of Obinikwa. Ogeni nodded, relief evident on his face at the cordial reception. Your Highness is most gracious. May the union bring blessings to the kingdom, he said diplomatically. King Omekagu's smile broadened, and for a moment he indeed looked the part of a benevolent ruler. That is my hope as well, he said. He took Akune's hand in his own larger hand. She noticed his palm was warm and his grip firm. Leading her a step forward, he raised his voice, addressing a handful of courtiers and guards in the hall. Behold Akune, the new queen-to-be of Obinikwa. The small gathering bowed or cheered respectfully. Akune saw an older woman in fine attire dab at her eyes with a cloth, perhaps a relative of a previous queen moved by the moment. King Omekagu then leaned closer to Akune and spoke softly for her ears alone. You must be tired. My chamberlain will show you to your quarters. Rest and refresh yourself. Tomorrow we shall be wed and you will be crowned as my queen. He paused, his eyes searching hers deeply as he added in a gentle tone, I know you have shown great courage coming here, given what has befallen those before you. Let me assure you, I will do everything in my power to protect you and make you happy, Akune. His words were kind, but something about them made Akune's stomach twist slightly. He did not say the curse isn't real, she noticed, but she forced a grateful smile. Thank you, Your Highness. I am honored to be here, she said. With that, the king released her hand. We shall dine together this evening so we can talk more, he announced. Then, to the chamberlain, he signaled, Chief Ume, see the queen-to-be to the royal wife's quarters. Chief Ume bowed. At once, my king. He motioned to Akune. Please follow me, my lady. Akune gave a polite nod to King Omekagu, who returned to his throne. Then she followed the chamberlain out of the hall. Elder Ogeni trailed behind, feeling somewhat out of place in these opulent surroundings. They walked through another corridor and into a quieter wing of the palace. Chief Ume pointed out a few things along the way. That is the council hall. Over there is the library of the sages, and this compound here is where the queen's quarters are. He indicated a gated section of the palace that opened into a lush garden courtyard. Inside this enclosure stood a charming dwelling, a bungalow with whitewashed walls and a porch shaded by flowering plants. This will be your personal residence, Lady Akune, he explained. It was vacated and prepared for you after the last queen passed. He said the last part delicately, avoiding eye contact. Akune felt a pang at the mention of the last queen. She lived here, and now I walk in to replace her, Akune thought, her heart heavy. Still, she maintained her composure and gave a slight nod. In front of the bungalow awaited a group of servants, mostly women. One stepped forward, an older woman with graying hair and a gentle face. She wore a simple blue blouse and wrapper, indicating her status as a senior attendant. My lady, I am Neka, she introduced herself softly. I was a personal maid to the queens. I will serve you now. The way Neka said it, it sounded almost apologetic, as if she wished Akune did not have to be here under these circumstances. Akune offered a small smile. Thank you, Neka. I am grateful for your help. Chief Ume then addressed Akune and Ogeni. Elder Ogeni, accommodations have been arranged for you in the guest house for tonight. Tomorrow, after the wedding, you may return to your village or stay for the festivities as you wish. Ogeni bowed in thanks and excused himself to be shown his quarters, leaving Akune in the care of the women attendants. Before departing, Ume added to Akune, If you need anything, my lady, these attendants will provide it. You have some hours to rest before the evening meal with His Highness. I will send someone to fetch you when it is time. With another courteous nod, the chamberlain left. Once he was gone, Neka and two younger maids led Akune inside her new quarters. The interior was modest but comfortable, clearly prepared with care. There was a bed adorned with fresh white linens, a carved wooden chest for her belongings, and vases of fragrant flowers placed around to give a welcoming scent. Akune set down her small travel bundle, feeling overwhelmed. Nneka gently took Akune's hand and said, "Come, my lady, let us wash off the road dust and change you into fresh clothes. You will feel better." Her motherly tone eased some of the tension in Akune's chest. In a side chamber, the maids had drawn a bath in a large clay basin. As Akune bathed, Nneka hummed an old Igbo lullaby softly, a comforting sound that reminded Akune of home. The warm water and the kind presence of the women allowed her to finally relax a little. Afterwards, they dressed her in a clean outfit, a flowing ivory-colored dress embroidered with simple patterns. It was likely one of the previous queen's garments refitted for her. The thought was bittersweet. She wondered which queen had worn it, but she pushed that thought aside. Clean and dressed, Akune sat by the window overlooking the private garden. Nneka brought her a light meal of porridge and fruits, insisting she eat to keep up her strength. As Akune ate a few spoonfuls, she decided to gently ask Nneka a question that had been on her mind since she arrived. "Nneka," she began softly, "you have served the queens before me. You must have known them well." Nneka's hands, which were folding a cloth, paused, her eyes clouded with sorrow. "Yes, my lady, I served Queen Nuadi and Queen Orunta after her, and most recently Queen Ifeoma. They were all good women." Her voice quavered a little on the last name. Akune hesitated, then asked the burning question, What happened to them? Do you know how they died?" The two younger maids in the room exchanged weary glances and lowered their gazes, clearly uncomfortable with the subject. But Nneka did not shy away. She stepped closer to Akune and lowered her voice, although no one else was around but the maids. "I do not truly know, my lady. Each death was sudden and baffling. Queen Wadi simply went to sleep one night and never awakened. She was only 20, in perfect health. We found her in the morning, gone, as if she had just drifted off peacefully." Nneka swallowed. Queen Orunta collapsed one afternoon while walking in the gardens. One moment she was laughing, the next she clutched her chest and fell. She was dead before the physician arrived. And Queen Ifeoma, she fell ill with a fever. She weakened day by day for a week, until... Nneka pressed her lips together, steadying herself, until she was no more. Akune felt a chill despite the warm evening light spilling through the window. Hearing the details from someone who had been there made it painfully real. "It must have been terrible for you, for everyone," she murmured. Nneka nodded, eyes moist. "Yes, we were all heartbroken and frightened. After Queen Ifeoma passed last year, the king waited many months. Some thought he might not marry again at all. But the kingdom's laws and the elders insisted. They said the kingdom must have a queen. So here you are." She reached out and gently squeezed Akune's shoulder. "I pray the gods protect you. Truly, I do." Akune covered Nneka's hand with her own, moved by the older woman's sincerity. "Thank you. I am determined to live, Nneka. I will do all I can to stay safe and well. I don't believe any spirit would want to harm an innocent person. There must be a reason, something causing this." Nneka looked at her with a slightly startled expression, perhaps at hearing Akune voice doubt that it was mere curse or spirits, but she simply patted Akune's hand. "Rest now, my lady. Save your strength. You can think about all this later. For now, focus on the wedding and getting through tomorrow." Realizing she might have said too much, Akune nodded and forced a small smile. "You are right. Tomorrow is a big day." But even as she lay down to rest for a while, her mind would not be still. There was a mystery here, a deadly one. Whether it was a curse or something else, she had to find out. Her life depended on it. With that resolve firm in her heart, Akune closed her eyes to gather energy for the evening to come, hoping the answers would start to reveal themselves soon. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Akune found herself dressing for a private dinner with King Omekagu. Nneka and the other maids helped arrange her hair and draped a light shawl over her shoulders. They moved with excitement and nervousness, aware that this was an important moment for the new bride-to-be. When Akune arrived at the dining hall, she was surprised to find it nearly empty. Only King Omekagu and a couple of his closest advisors were present at a long table lit by oil lamps. The room was quiet, with servants standing along the walls ready to serve, but speaking in hushed tones. The king smiled and stood as she approached. "Akune, please join me," Omekagu said warmly, gesturing to the seat beside him. He had changed into a casual but elegant robe of deep maroon, and he smelt of jasmine oil. Akune noticed the advisors discreetly withdraw to give them more privacy once she sat down. Dinner was a spread of the kingdom's finest foods: spiced goat stew, pounded yam, steamed vegetables, and sweet palm wine in carved gourds. King Omekagu personally poured Akune a cup of palm wine. "To your health and happiness, my dear," he toasted, raising his own cup. Akune lifted hers and clinked cups gently. "And to yours, your highness," she replied before sipping. The sweet, fermented taste of the palm wine was comforting. It reminded her of home. As they began to eat, Omekagu engaged her in conversation. He asked about her family and village. Akune answered politely, telling him about her parents and the small farm they tended. She described Nkata's peaceful life by the river. The king listened with keen interest. "You speak lovingly of your home. I hope you will come to think of Obinikpa as your home as well," he said with a smile. "I know it must be difficult to leave your family." Akune nodded slightly. "It is, but I will do my best to serve the people here as queen. My family understands this duty." The king reached out and briefly touched her hand on the table, a gesture meant to be reassuring. "Akune, you have a noble heart," he said. "Not everyone meets such duty with grace and courage." At the mention of courage, Akune tensed for a fraction of a second. She wondered if he was alluding to the fate of the previous queens, but his expression remained kind. Perhaps it was just a general compliment. After a pause, she mustered the nerve to ask gently, "Your Highness, may I ask something?" "Of course," Omekagu encouraged, leaning back in his chair comfortably. She chose her words carefully. "I have heard many things in the village about what befell the queens before me. The people say there is a curse. Are you afraid of it?" King Omekagu's eyes flickered, and for just an instant, Akune thought he saw a shadow cross his face. But he let out a soft sigh and nodded gravely. "I know the rumors. It has been a painful time for me, losing my wives one after the other. They were all good women." He looked down, as if in mourning. "Curses? Such talk spreads easily among the fearful. I cannot blame them. But as king, I must remain strong. I do not have the luxury of fear." It was a careful answer, Akune thought. He neither confirmed nor denied the curse's existence, only that he wouldn't show fear of it. There was a subtle distance in how he spoke of his wives' deaths. He seemed more resigned than grief-stricken. Akune pressed no further for now, unsure what to make of it. As the meal went on, the king's mood lightened again. He told her stories of the capital city's festivals and asked if she had ever seen a masquerade dance. She admitted she hadn't, and he laughed gently, promising that when the next festival came, she would witness the finest masquerades dancing in the palace square. At the end of the dinner, the king clapped his hands. A servant promptly brought forward a polished wooden box and presented it to him. Omekagu opened the box and turned to Akune with a charming smile. Inside, on velvet lining, lay a stunning necklace. It was made of interlocking gold pieces inlaid with red coral beads that glimmered in the lamplight. "This is for you," the king said, lifting the necklace from its box. "It is a royal heirloom, passed down through the generations of queens in Obinikpa. My first wife wore it at our wedding. I would be honored if you would wear it tomorrow when we marry, and always afterwards as a symbol of your status and our bond." Akune's breath caught at the necklace's beauty, but hearing it belonged to the late queen sent a small shiver through her. Still, she managed to smile appreciatively. "It's magnificent, Your Highness. I am honored." She leaned forward to allow him to place it around her neck. As King Omekagu fastened the necklace, Akune felt the weight of it settle on her collarbones. It felt heavier than she expected, almost as if it were pressing down on her. She also felt a slight prickling sensation where the metal touched her skin, like a tiny static shock. It was so brief she wondered if she imagined it. The king's fingers brushed the back of her neck as he adjusted the clasp, and she repressed a shudder. When he was done, he looked at her admiringly. "Perfect. It suits you." He motioned to a servant who brought over a polished brass plate that served as a mirror. Akune saw her reflection with the necklace. It was indeed beautiful, the red beads contrasting with her smooth brown skin and the white of her dress. She forced a smile, though in her heart she felt an unease she could not explain. "Thank you, my king," she said respectfully. Shortly after, the king escorted Akune back towards her quarters. The halls were quiet at this hour, lit by torches. When they reached the door of her bungalow, the king paused and gently took her hands in his. "Tomorrow you will be my wife, and our journey together begins. I want you to know, Akune, that I truly hope to bring you happiness and safety." His dark eyes looked into hers intensely. Akune felt those words again lacked something. He hoped to bring her safety, not that she would be safe. She bowed her head. "I pray the same, Your Highness." He lifted one of her hands to his lips and placed a kiss on it, a gesture that made her skin crawl slightly, despite the outward romance of it. "Sleep well, my dear," he said softly. "We both have a big day tomorrow." With that, King Omekagu turned and departed, his royal sandals whispering on the tile floor as he went. Akune exhaled slowly and entered her quarters. Inside, Nneka was waiting anxiously. She noticed the necklace at once. "Oh, His Highness gave you that, did he?" she asked, her tone polite but her eyes wary. "Yes," Akune replied, touching it lightly. It belonged to the previous queens. She thought she saw Nneka grimace ever so slightly. "Let me help you take it off for the night, my lady," Nneka offered, reaching for the clasp. Strangely, Akune's first instinct was to refuse. She felt an odd reluctance to remove it, as if it had attached itself to her. But rationally, she had no reason to sleep in a heavy necklace. "All right," she consented. Nneka struggled briefly with the clasp. "It stuck," she muttered, fiddling. At last it came loose. As soon as the necklace was off, Akune felt a relief, as if a pressure around her neck had lifted. She hadn't realized how tense she felt wearing it until it was gone. She rubbed her neck. "Thank you. I'll wear it again tomorrow as he asked," she said. Nneka nodded and carefully set the necklace in its box on a table. "It is very fine. You should try to get some sleep now, my lady. Tomorrow will be busy from dawn." Akune agreed. Despite the swirl of thoughts in her head, she was tired. She changed into a simple night wrap and lay on the bed. Nneka offered to stay on a mat at the door in case Akune needed anything in the night, but Akune gently declined. "Go and rest, Nneka. I'll be fine." The older woman hesitated, clearly concerned, but eventually she left Akune to sleep, promising to return at first light to help her prepare. Alone in the silence, Akune stared up at the ceiling. Her mind replayed every detail of the evening, the king's measured answers, the strange weight of the necklace, Nneka's stories of the previous queens. She felt an almost irresistible urge to get up and examine that necklace again, but she resisted. Instead, she eventually drifted into a fitful sleep. The next day dawned clear and bright, an auspicious sign according to custom. Wedding preparations began early. Palace servants moved like bees, decorating the main courtyard with colorful fabrics and fresh palm fronds. By late morning, guests from all over the kingdom had arrived. Village chiefs in their ceremonial robes, titled men and women with coral bead necklaces and ivory bracelets, and ordinary folk who were allowed to stand at the edges to witness the rare spectacle of a royal wedding. In her quarters, Akun was a flurry of nerves beneath a composed exterior. Nneka and 2 other women dressed her in the traditional attire for a bride. They wrapped her in layers of beautiful cloth, one patterned in deep blue and gold that shimmered in the light. Around her waist they tied a beaded sash, and they placed golden bangles on her wrists and ankles. Finally, Nneka retrieved the coral and gold necklace and fastened it around Akun's neck once more. Akun managed not to flinch this time, though again she felt that subtle prickling sensation. She took a deep breath, dismissing it as imagination and anxiety. Nneka stepped back and looked at her with a sad sort of smile. "You look every bit a queen, Akun," she said softly. The other maids murmured agreement, their eyes shining. Akun realized some of them were trying not to cry, likely remembering the last queen they had dressed just like this. "Thank you," Akun said, reaching out to squeeze Nneka's hand briefly in gratitude and reassurance. A palace official soon arrived to escort Akun to the ceremony. As custom dictated, the wedding would be held in the open courtyard under the eyes of the ancestors, symbolized by the sun and sky. The king and Akun would perform the marriage rites before the people and the gods. Trumpets sounded, announcing the bride's approach. Akun stepped into the sunlight and a collective hush fell over the gathered crowd. She saw hundreds of faces turned towards her, curious, hopeful, fearful. King Omekagu stood at the center of the courtyard, majestic in his ceremonial attire. He wore a flowing white robe with intricate embroidery, and on his head was not the crown today, but a traditional red cap of kingship decorated with eagle feathers. Akun walked forward slowly, flanked by 2 young girls who scattered flower petals on the ground ahead of her. She kept her eyes forward, heart pounding. When she reached the king, she bowed her head respectfully. Omekagu gave her an encouraging smile and offered his hand. She placed her palm in his and turned with him to face the assembly. The ceremony began with a blessing from the kingdom's high priest, an ancient man with chalk markings on his body. He invoked the Almighty God and the ancestors to bless this union, to bring fertility, long life, and prosperity to the royal couple. Akun felt a pang at the words long life. Would that blessing hold true for her? Next came the sharing of kola nuts, a symbol of hospitality and agreement. An elder presented a kola nut to King Omekagu, who split it in half. He handed one half to Akun. She held the bitter nut in her mouth for a moment, then chewed and swallowed her part as the king did the same with his. It was a gesture that they would now share everything in life, both bitter and sweet. Now came the portion of the ceremony unique to Igbo tradition, the wine carrying. Akun's father, Okeke, had traveled overnight and arrived at the capital early that morning with Ezinne so they could attend the wedding. Now, Okeke came forward holding a wooden cup filled with palm wine. His hands trembled slightly as he passed it to Akun, eyes full of tears of both joy and worry. "Take this, my daughter," he said, loud enough for those near to hear, though his voice shook. "Find your husband and give him to drink." This was the custom. The bride would offer palm wine to her groom, signifying she had chosen him among all men and was willingly giving herself to him. In a typical village wedding, the groom might playfully hide among the crowd for the bride to find, but here, King Omekagu stood openly beside her. Akun took the cup from her father with both hands. She then turned to Omekagu. Their eyes met. She found her voice steady as she spoke clearly. "My king, I have searched and I have found the man my heart chooses. please accept this wine from my hands." She knelt gracefully and offered the cup up to him. Omekago accepted the cup, placing his hand over hers briefly. Instead of drinking immediately, he raised the cup and declared to the onlookers, "Before all gathered here, I accept this woman, Akun, as my wife and queen. May our union bring blessing to Obinikpa." With that, he brought the cup to his lips and drank deeply of the sweet wine. A cheer went up from the crowd. The palace drummers began to beat a joyful rhythm. Omekago pulled Akune gently to her feet, and to her surprise, he also took a sip of wine and then offered the cup to her to drink from as well, symbolizing that he also chose her. Akune sipped from the same spot on the cup's rim, a gesture of trust and intimacy. The high priest then produced a fine silken cloth and tied it loosely around Omekago's left wrist and Akune's right wrist, binding them together lightly. "You are now bound as one," the priest proclaimed. "What the gods have joined, let no man put asunder." Finally, one of the king's titled chiefs approached, carrying a crown for the new queen. It was a delicate circlet of gold with a single shining gemstone at the front. Akune knelt, and the chief placed it on her head. "Rise, Queen of Obinikpa," he said. Akune stood, now officially Queen Akune. The crowd erupted in applause and cries of celebration. Flower petals rained down as children ran around joyfully. Yet, amidst the revelry, Akune could sense an underlying tension in the smiles of those closest. Her mother's face was wet with tears, whether of happiness or fear, likely both. Eneka stood among the attendants clapping, but her lips moved silently in what looked like a prayer. Even King Omekago, though grinning broadly as he waved to his people with their hands still loosely bound by the symbolic cloth, had a tightness around his eyes. Everyone was hoping for the best, but prepared for the worst. The rest of the day passed in a blur of festivities. There was feasting, dance performances by skilled troops, and music that echoed through the palace grounds. Akune stayed by the king's side through it all, smiling and gracious, though she felt as if she were watching someone else live her life. The weight of the coral necklace and the crown on her head served as constant reminders of the role she now inhabited. King Omekago remained attentive and even gentle with her, holding her hand or waist in public, introducing her proudly to various dignitaries. If she hadn't known about the grim history of his wives, she might have believed him to be a devoted, even loving husband. But under the surface, she sensed something guarded in him, as if a part of him was far away even in the merriment. As dusk fell, torches were lit and the crowd began to disperse. Customarily, the people would leave the couple to their privacy on the wedding night. The king's advisors wished them well and retired. Akune's parents each embraced her tightly one more time. Her mother whispered, "Be safe, my daughter," and her father simply kissed her forehead, his eyes pained and proud. They, along with Elder Ogene, were given lodging for the night, but would depart back to Nkata the next day. Finally, as stars blinked into the sky, Akune was escorted by Eneka to the king's private chambers for the night. Eneka helped her out of the heavy ceremonial gown, leaving her in a lighter wrap, and then left her at the antechamber of Omekago's quarters with a final reassuring hand squeeze. 2 guards stood at the far end of the corridor, ensuring the royal private wing was secure. Akune's heart thumped loudly in her ears as she waited alone. She was about to spend her first night with the king, an idea that only days ago would have seemed impossible. Yet more than modesty or romantic jitters, it was fear of the unknown that made her pulse race. Would something happen to her this night, as it had to the others? She closed her eyes briefly, steeling herself with silent determination. I will survive this. I will uncover the truth. The door to the inner chamber opened, and King Omekago emerged, now dressed in a simple night robe. He gave her a warm smile. "My queen," he said softly, extending his hand. She took it, and he led her inside. The king's bedchamber was spacious and luxurious. A large bed draped with mosquito netting, plush rugs on the floor, and lamps casting a gentle glow. A bowl of fresh fruits and a jug of palm wine sat on a table provided for them. Omekagu guided Akune to sit on the edge of the bed beside him. For a few moments, they talked quietly, idle chat about the day's ceremonies and kind words of how beautiful she looked. He stroked her hand with his thumb absent-mindedly as they spoke. Akune responded when needed, but her mind was alert for any sign of danger or strangeness. After a while, Omekagu poured 2 cups of palm wine. He handed one to Akune and kept one. "A final toast for just the 2 of us," he said, raising the cup. "To a long life together," Akune offered, meeting his gaze steadily as she raised hers. "Yes, a long life," he echoed, with an inscrutable smile, and they both drank. The wine was strong and sweet. Akune sipped only a little, wary of dulling her senses. It was known some men gave their brides herbs to calm them on the wedding night. She could not be sure if this drink was spiked, but she wouldn't finish it just in case. Soon, Omekagu set his empty cup aside. He gently tilted Akune's chin up and kissed her. She willed herself to remain calm, closing her eyes. There was nothing overtly threatening in his kiss. It was soft, searching, but Akune felt no warmth from it, only a reminder of the role she must play to survive. After a few moments, the king drew back and looked at her fondly. "Rest, my dear. You must be exhausted. We have plenty of time ahead of us." He brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. Akune nodded demurely. Omekagu walked over to extinguish one of the lamps, dimming the room. He then returned and lay down on the bed, motioning her to join. With a silent breath to steady herself, Akune lay down as well. The king draped an arm over her in a possessive yet comforting manner. "Good night, Akune," he murmured. "Good night, Omekagu," she whispered, the name feeling strange on her tongue in such an intimate moment. In the stillness that followed, Akune kept her eyes closed, forcing her breathing to become slow and even, as if she had fallen asleep quickly. She suspected the king might be waiting for her to sleep. Sure enough, after some time, she wasn't sure how long, perhaps an hour, she felt him gently slide his arm off of her. Through her lashes, she saw him sit up, peering at her face. She remained very still, breathing deeply. Satisfied that she was asleep, King Omekagu carefully rose from the bed. Akune almost held her breath but kept the rhythmic rise and fall of her chest consistent. The king quietly crossed the room and slipped out through a side door. It closed behind him with a soft click. Her eyes snapped open in the darkness. Her heart pounded wildly. Where is he going in the middle of the night? This was highly unusual on one's wedding night. Any husband would be expected to stay with his new bride, unless he had something more important to do. Her mind flashed to the stories of the queens. Could it be that on those nights he had also slipped away? The thought made her blood run cold. This could be her only chance to find out what he was up to. Quietly, Akune slid out of the bed. The room spun slightly. Perhaps the wine had indeed been laced with a mild sedative, but she was not fully under its influence thanks to her caution. She steadied herself and tiptoed to the side door through which Omekagu had gone. She pressed her ear to against it. At first, she heard nothing. Carefully, she eased it open. The door led to a narrow passage lit by a single torch on the wall. In the distance, she could see King Omekagu turning a corner at the end of the corridor, holding a small oil lamp. He had not taken any guards or attendants. He was alone and moving with purpose. Akune's heart hammered. She knew this was dangerous. If he caught her, what would he think? But her need to know the truth overpowered her fear. Staying well behind, she followed silently. The corridor was unfamiliar. It seemed to head towards an older, seldom-used section of the palace. The walls were bare, and the floor was cooler on her feet. Akune kept to the shadows, grateful that she had left her jangling jewelry back in the bedroom, aside from the necklace, which fortunately made no sound. King Omekagu turned another corner and descended a flight of stone stairs. Akune waited at the top until he was far enough ahead, then she crept down after him, each step careful to avoid making a sound. She saw him reach a heavy wooden door. He paused, then produced a key from his robe and unlocked it. The door creaked open and he slipped inside. Akune reached the bottom of the stairs just as the door was about to close. She caught a glimpse of a faint orange glow from within, likely from lamps or candles inside whatever chamber that was. She carefully approached. The door had closed, but not fully. The latch hadn't caught. Through the small crack, she pressed her eye to the opening to peer inside. What she saw made her blood turn to ice. It was a hidden chamber of some kind, perhaps a storage room or shrine that had been repurposed. The walls were lined with strange markings drawn in white chalk and dark substances that might have been dried blood. Candles flickered at the corners of the room, casting dancing shadows. In the center of the floor, King Omekago stood before a low stone altar. On the altar lay several items, bowls filled with a red liquid, odd carvings of wooden figures, and chillingly, 3 small gourds, each tied with red cloth and cowrie shells. At once, Akune recalled a tale she had heard from her grandmother about dark sorcery. These looked like ifeagu, forbidden fetish vessels rumored to hold captured life essence. King Omekago began to chant in a low voice. It was a language Akune did not recognize, certainly not Igbo or any tongue commonly spoken. It sounded guttural, ancient, each word sending shivers through the air. As he chanted, he picked up one of the little gourds and raised it above his head. Akune's eyes widened. Through the dim light, she could see the gourd had some blackish substance smeared on it and symbols drawn around it. The Kong addressed the god almost tenderly, slipping into Igbo now. "My beautiful Nuadi," he murmured, and Akune realized with horror, Nuadi was the name of his first wife. He continued, voice reverent and cold, "Your spirit feeds mine. Your sacrifice keeps me strong. I thank you." He kissed the god and set it back down. Akune felt bile rise in her throat as the truth became clearer than daylight. King Omekago was performing a ritual with tokens representing his dead queens, thanking them for the strength their deaths gave him. He lifted another god. "Oruta," he whispered to the second, the name of the second wife. "So full of life you were. I took that life for myself. It has served me well. Your debt to your king is paid." He chuckled softly, a chilling sound in the lonely chamber. Tears pricked at Akune's eyes as anger and disgust swelled within her. She clamped a hand over her mouth to keep any sound from escaping. "He killed them, he killed them," her mind screamed. It was not a curse from some ghost or god. It was him all along, using foul magic. Finally, Omekago raised the third god tied with a bright cloth. This one must symbolize Queen Ifeoma, the most recent victim. "Ifeoma," he intoned quietly, "stubborn one, you fought the longest." His voice dropped, filled with menace. "But in the end, you too gave me your life. See how strong I stand, how youth remains in my flesh." He spread his free hand as if to display his vigor. "All thanks to you, my wives, my queens, my sacrifices." Akune realized with a start that King Omekago indeed looked remarkably youthful for a man rumored to be past 50. The thought had passed through the kingdom's gossip but was never seriously questioned. Now the evidence stood in front of her. He had preserved himself by draining the lives of the women he married. Her blood ran hot with outrage and terror. Then King Omekago set down Ifeoma's god. He reached for something else on the altar, a fresh empty clay bowl and a small knife. He pricked his own finger with the knife, letting a few drops of his blood fall into the bowl. Then he reached into a pouch and took out. Akune's heart lurched. It was a strand of hair. She instinctively touched her own hair. Earlier that day, the maids had trimmed a little of her hair while styling it. He must have obtained a strand from them or during the day somehow. The king held up the single long hair, its dark sheen unmistakably hers. In a clear voice resonant with power, he began to chant again in that strange tongue. Akune felt a slight ringing in her ears as the atmosphere thickened with energy. He dropped her hair into the bowl with his blood and stirred it with the knife. "Bride of mine," he said in Igbo, addressing that mixture, "your life shall be my life, your strength my strength. With this bond I tie you to me. When When you blossom, I flourish. When you wither, your essence flows into me. Akune bit down on her finger to stifle a cry. She understood perfectly. He was performing the binding ritual to ensure her life would gradually siphon into his, just as he did with the others. The necklace at her throat suddenly felt burning hot, as if reacting to his words. Perhaps it was part of the conduit, a cursed object tying her to him. Her vision blurred with tears of rage. This monster, she thought, he is the cause. The urge to bust in and stop him was overwhelming, but she knew she was no match for him physically, and he had dark magic on his side here. If she confronted him now, she would likely be killed on the spot, or worse. Instead, Akune retreated a step, then another, careful not to make noise. She could hear the king starting to laugh softly in triumph as he completed the incantation. That sound propelled her. She turned and swiftly but silently moved back up the stairs, heart thundering. She had to get out, right now, this very night. Her mind raced. She couldn't risk going back to his chamber. He might return and then she'd be caught. She was still dressed in her thin night wrap. No time to gather belongings. Akune touched the necklace. She desperately wanted to tear it off now that she knew it was part of his magic, but she feared he might sense something if the bond was broken incorrectly. Perhaps the priestess she'd heard of could remove it safely. Yes, the priestess. Akune remembered the tales of a wise woman in the neighboring land who could see the unseen and break curses. If anyone could sever this unholy bond between her and the king, it would be that priestess. Keeping to the shadows, Akune made her way back towards her own quarters. She dared not return to the king's bedroom. Instead, she followed a different hallway that Neka had shown her earlier, which led directly to the courtyard. Thankfully, most of the palace was asleep or at least indoors due to the late hour. The corridor was empty. Reaching her quarters briefly, she slipped inside long enough to grab a plain dark shawl to cover herself and some simple leather sandals for her feet. She saw the diary from Queen Ifelma given by Neka peeking out of her travel bag where she had hidden it earlier. On impulse, she snatched it too and tucked the slim journal into her wrap. Evidence and knowledge, she thought, might be useful. Akune considered alerting Neka or someone loyal, but no, anyone could betray her to the king either out of fear or loyalty to him. She could trust no one inside these cursed walls. She had to do this alone. Drawing the shawl over her head and shoulders, she slipped out into the night. The courtyard was dim, lit only by a few dying torches. She skulked along the edges, hiding behind pillars when a lone guard passed by at a distance. Her heart was in her throat the entire time. At last, Akune reached a small side gate in the palace wall, one she had seen earlier which led out to the royal orchards behind the palace. It was barred by a heavy wooden beam. Summoning all her strength, Akune lifted the beam quietly and set it aside. The gate squeaked slightly as she pulled it open just wide enough to slip through. She glanced over her shoulder at the silent palace one last time. In that moment, under the pale moonlight, she swore she saw a shadow move on the rooftop, perhaps an owl or just her imagination. She could not hesitate. Akune stepped out into the night beyond the palace walls. Without a backward glance, she closed the gate, leaving it unbarred to avoid noise. Then she wrapped the shawl tightly around herself and ran, disappearing into the darkness of the surrounding fields and forests. Tonight, truth had been revealed in the deepest corners of the palace. Akune now knew the full horror behind the so-called curse. And though fear pulsed through her veins, it was overpowered by a fierce resolve. She would not end up another god on that altar. No evil, no curse, no king's wicked scheme was stronger than the truth she carried. If she could reach the priestess and break this bond, King Omekagu's reign of terror would finally meet its reckoning. Akune fled into the night with only the stars and a waning moon to light her way. She ran down a narrow path that led away from the palace, her bare feet pounding the earth. The shawl she'd grabbed fluttered behind her like a dark wing. Every rustle in the bushes, every gust of wind made her flinch, but she did not dare slow down. The tall silhouette of the palace walls receded behind her as she sprinted across the open fields surrounding Obinikba's capital. Her mind was in turmoil. The horrific scene she had witnessed in the secret chamber replayed over and over. King Omekagu chanting over the gods, naming his dead wives, binding Akune's life to his. Tears blurred her vision, but she blinked them away. I must keep going, she urged herself. If I stop, I die. For a while, the only sounds were her ragged breathing and the chorus of crickets and nighttime frogs. She kept off the main roads, instead cutting through fallow farmlands and skirting along a grove of banana trees. The night air was warm and humid, causing sweat to bead on her forehead. But Akune felt cold inside, knowing that at any moment the alarm might be raised behind her. Sure enough, as she reached a small stream that marked the edge of the farmlands, she heard it. A distant boom of a drum, then another. She paused, chest heaving, and listened. The drum beats were coming from the direction of the palace, deep, resonant notes carrying through the still night. They were royal alarm signals. They've discovered I'm gone, Akune whispered to herself, heart lurching. Perhaps King Omekagu had returned to his chamber and found her missing, or a guard noticed the unbarred gate. In any case, they knew the new queen had vanished and they would come searching. A surge of fear propelled her onward. Akune splashed through the shallow stream, not caring that her wrap and legs got drenched. On the other side, dense forest loomed. The trees stood like silent giants, their interlocking branches forming a near-black canopy that the moonlight barely penetrated. This was the beginning of the vast woodland that separated Obinikba from the neighboring kingdom to the west. Many travelers feared these woods by night, whispering of spirits and wild animals. But to Akune, any danger in the forest was lesser than the evil she fled behind her. She pushed into the undergrowth, wincing as thorny vines scratched her arms. In her haste, she nearly tripped over an exposed root, but caught herself against a tree trunk. The ground was uneven and tangled with foliage, forcing her to slow to a careful stride. As she moved deeper among the trees, the darkness thickened. The drum sounds from the palace grew faint with distance, though once or twice she thought she heard faint shouts carried on the wind. Focus, she urged herself under her breath. She needed to navigate through and out of this forest to reach the neighboring land where the priestess lived. She had heard of this priestess since she was a child, an old wise woman who was said to reside just beyond the western border of Obinikba, near a town called Inshoko in the next kingdom. That must be who she needed to find. Seeing truths beyond the physical world, the phrase from the stories echoed in her mind. If anyone could help her sever this cursed bond, King Omekagu's reign of terror would finally meet its reckoning. But first she had to survive the night and make it to Inshoko by morning. She figured if she kept westward, she'd eventually cross the border. Akune looked up through a gap in the branches, trying to spot the North Star to guide her. The sky glittered with countless stars. She found the 3-star belt of the Hunter constellation and remembered her father's lessons. Draw a line through the belt to find the bright North Star. Orienting herself, she determined west was to her left, adjusted her course accordingly, pushing through the bracken. Time lost meaning in the darkness. Akune didn't know how long she had been stumbling through the forest, perhaps an hour or more. The trees around her seemed endless. Occasionally, she would stop to listen for sounds of pursuit. Once she had distant barking, maybe palace hounds on her trail. The thought spurred her into a near run again until her lungs burned and she had to pause. In the stillness, the forest was alive with its own murmurs. Twigs crackled under unseen feet, likely small animals, she told herself. An owl hooted overhead, insects hummed. Each sound made her jumpy. Her imagination, fueled by fear and exhaustion, started to conjure shapes in the shadows. Was that a pale figure gliding between those trees? Akune squeezed her eyes shut and opened them again, and the figure was gone. Keep it together, she thought. Don't start seeing things. But the memory of the king's dark magic made anything seem possible tonight. At one point, Akune stepped into a small clearing where weak moonlight illuminated an old abandoned shrine. A weathered wooden carving of a deity stood among overgrown weeds. She scattered it carefully, but not before silently murmuring a plea. Ancestors, guide me, protect me from the evil behind and any evil ahead. It was all she could do to keep her courage from failing. Not long after, as she clambered over a fallen log, a sudden movement to her right startled her. Something large and dark streaked between the bushes. Akune squeezed her breath, froze, listening. In the quiet night, she heard low guttural growls. Her heart thundered. Slowly, she crouched and grabbed a broken tree branch at her feet, wielding it like a club. The growling came again, from a few yards away. Peering through the gloom, she finally saw it, a pair of glowing eyes at ground level, reflecting what little moonlight there was. The creature stepped forward, revealing a sinewy form covered in greyish fur, a wild dog or wolf, teeth bared, lips drawn in a snarl. It had caught her scent. Akune's mouth went dry. She knew running would trigger it to chase, and she was too tired to outrun a beast. Instead, she tried to make herself seem larger. She raised her arms, brandishing the stick, and shouted hoarsely, "Ha! Get away!" Her voice echoed oddly among the trees. The wild dog snarled louder, pacing sideways as if to circle her. Then another rustle. A second set of eyes appeared to her left. 2 of them, perhaps a small pack. Panic rose in Akuna's chest. Desperation lent her courage. She screamed at the animals, swinging the stick wildly. "Leave! Go!" she cried. For a second, the creatures hesitated, startled by her sudden ferocity. One even backed off a step. Taking that chance, Akune slowly started edging away, keeping the branch up. But her foot slid on a patch of wet leaves, and she stumbled backward. In an instant, the bolder wild dog lunged, sensing weakness. Akune thrust the branch forward with a cry. The makeshift club struck the animal's snout mid-leap. The dog yelped and recoiled, more surprised than hurt. Before it could recover, Akune scrambled up and dashed away through the underbrush, abandoning the branch. She heard the wild dogs barking and crashing behind her, giving chase. She ran wildly, zigzagging between trees. Thorns snagged her shawl and hair, but she tore free. Low-hanging branches whipped at her face and arms. The barking drew closer. They were fast. Adrenaline pumping, Akune spotted a thick tree ahead with low branches. Summoning all her strength, she jumped and grabbed the lowest branch, pulling herself up just as one of the dogs snapped at her heels. Its teeth grazed the sole of her sandal, tugging it off her foot. Akune cried out but kept climbing, scrambling up onto the branch. The animal leapt and backed below, frustrated. The 2 wild dogs circled the base of the tree, growling and yapping. Akune clung to the branch, chest heaving, one sandal lost. In the faint light, she saw one dog, a scrawny beast with patchy fur, sniff at her fallen sandal and gnaw on it. The other sat on its haunches, yellow eyes fixed on her hungrily. Akune's arms trembled with fatigue as she held on. She balanced herself carefully and tried to catch her breath. What could she do now? She could not stay in this tree forever, and these animals showed no sign of leaving. She looked around for anything useful. Only leaves and branches met her gaze. The wild dog that had her sandal began tugging at her shawl's trailing edge that hung down from the branch. With a snarl, it ripped a piece of the fabric off and shook it. Akune winced. Her grandmother had woven that shawl, but material things meant little now compared to survival. As the minutes passed, her heart rate slowed from frantic to merely fast. She thought of the palace again and King Omekagu. If his men followed, the dogs might actually keep them at bay, strangely protecting her for the moment. But eventually, either the animals would tire or find a way up, or the king's men would arrive. She realized with a sinking feeling that she might not make it to see the priestess at all if she remained stuck here till dawn. No, I must not think that way. She had to find a way out. Her hand brushed against something in the folds of her wrap, Queen Ifeoma's small diary, which she had snatched in her escape. An idea sparked. Carefully, Akune pulled out the little book. It wasn't large, but if she could distract the dogs. Tearing a page from the diary pained her. It was precious information, but she decided one page could be sacrificed. She crumpled the paper into a ball. The dogs pecked up at the slight motion above. Akune then tossed the paper wad as far as she could to the right. It rustled in the bushes a short distance away. Both dogs instantly darted toward the sound, curious. Seizing the moment, Akune swiftly and quietly descended the opposite side of the tree. Her arms were weak, but fear gave her strength to lower herself down. The second her bare feet touched the ground, she took off in the direction she had originally been running, westward, leaving the confused dogs behind by the tree. She ran wildly, zigzagging between trees. Thorns snagged her shawl and hair, but she tore free. Low-hanging branches whipped at her face and arms. The barking drew closer. They were fast. Adrenaline pumping, Akune spotted a thick tree ahead with low branches. Summoning all her strength, she jumped and grabbed the lowest branch, pulling herself up just as one of the dogs snapped at her heels. Its teeth grazed the sole of her sandal, tugging it off her foot. Akune cried out but kept climbing, scrambling up onto the branch. The animal leapt and backed below, frustrated. At long last, Akune noticed the forest beginning to thin. The trees were more spaced out and moonlight spilled onto patches of grassy ground. Could she be nearing the border? She recalled that a large river marked the boundary between Obinikpa and the neighboring kingdom. If she found the river, she would know she was close to safety. Sure enough, a short while later, she heard the faint but unmistakable sound of flowing water ahead. With renewed hope, Akune pushed through the final line of bushes and emerged onto the banks of a wide river shimmering under the moon's reflection. It was perhaps 50 paces across, not too fast-flowing but deep in parts. This must be the Ijele River dividing the two lands. Relief and anxiety mingled in her chest. She had reached the border, but how to cross? There was no bridge in sight at this remote part. She could swim, but she was so exhausted, and the current in the meadow looked strong. Perhaps there was a shallow ford somewhere nearby. Following the river's edge, she scanned for a narrower section or stepping stones. As she did, an even more pressing need made itself known. Her head spun, and black spots danced at the edges of her vision. She hadn't eaten since the midday wedding feast, and all the running plus the stress was taking its toll. Akune knelt at the riverbank and scooped up some water in her palms. She drank, cool liquid soothing her parched throat. It gave a little strength back. She also washed her face, taking care to be quiet. If a royal search party was nearby, she didn't want to draw attention. Then, under the pale pre-dawn light, for the sky was just beginning to lighten to a deep blue in the east, she noticed an area a short distance downstream where the water appeared shallower, rippling over some rocks. Summoning her courage, Akune waded into the river there. The water was icy against her skin, making her gasp. But it only reached her waist at the shallowest part. She took careful steps on the slippery stones, fighting the current tugging at her legs. Halfway across, the water rose to her chest, and the current nearly swept her off her feet. She steadied herself against a larger rock, panting with effort. It was in that precarious moment, with the river threatening to bowl her over, that her body finally rebelled. Her muscles cramped from cold and fatigue. Akune lost her footing. With a cry, she plunged into the deeper channel of the river. The current grabbed her eagerly, pulling her downstream. She flailed, swallowing a mouthful of water. Panic set in as she was dragged under briefly. "No!" she spluttered, kicking desperately. Her head broke the surface and she managed a gulp of air before the current spun her around. The far bank was only several yards away now, but the river's force made each yard a struggle. Akune's arms felt like lead, her legs sluggish. "Not like this," she thought wildly. "I can't die here." The image of King Omekagu's face, twisted in anger if he recaptured her, flashed through her mind, and she was filled with a burst of adrenaline. With a primal scream, she lunged forward, one arm outstretched. Her hand caught hold of a tree root protruding from the bank. She clung to it fiercely. Inch by inch, Akune hauled herself out of the water, fingers digging into mud and roots. At last, trembling and soaked, she crawled onto the far river bank, the territory of the neighboring kingdom. She collapsed on her back on the grass, chest heaving as she coughed out river water and tried to catch her breath. The sky was becoming lighter. Dawn was near. Akune could make out more of her surroundings now. The river behind her glistened steel grey in the early light. Ahead of her stretched a gentle slope dotted with acacia trees. In the distance, maybe a mile or so off, she saw the outline of a small settlement, smoke from cooking fires wafting upward. That must be a village in the neighboring kingdom. "I made it," she whispered, a weak smile forming on her lips. She had escaped Obinikwa and King Omekagu's immediate reach. But her journey was far from over. Akune rolled onto her knees and managed to stand, though every part of her protested. Her shawl was gone, one sandal lost, and her damp wrap clung heavily to her body. She must have looked like a spectre crawling out of the river. Step by step, she pushed herself to walk toward the distant village. The prospect of finding the priestess or anyone who could help kept her moving. Birds were beginning their morning chorus as the sky turned from deep blue to soft pink and purple. A new day was breaking, her first dawn as a runaway queen. As she trudged through the grass, she became aware of a figure in the distance moving toward her. Startled, Akune stopped. The figure seemed to be coming from the direction of the village, heading toward the river, perhaps a villager fetching water or checking fish traps at first light. Uncertain whether to hide or approach, Akune hesitated. For all she knew, King Omekagu's influence could reach across borders. But she also desperately needed help. The figure noticed her now and began to jog closer. Soon she could make out a young man, perhaps a few years older than herself. He was tall and well-built, carrying a hunting spear in one hand and a bundle of what looked like small game in the other. He slowed down a few yards away, taking in the sight of this drenched, disheveled woman in front of him. "Hello," he called out gently in Igbo, but with a slightly different accent. "Are you all right?" Akune opened her mouth, but her voice failed. The adrenaline that had kept her going was ebbing fast now that she was face to face with another person. All the terror, exhaustion, and relief combined overwhelmed her. Her knees buckled, and she sank to the ground. The young man rushed forward, dropping his catch. He knelt beside her, concern etched on his face. "Miss, what happened? Were you in the river?" he asked, noticing her soaked state. He quickly shrugged off a brown knitted shawl he had draped over his shoulder and wrapped it around Akune. "Here, you are shivering." Up close, Akune could see he had kind eyes and a strong, honest face. Despite her fatigue, she fought to stay conscious. This could be the help she needed. She tried to speak again. I need help," she managed to whisper, her throat raw. The stranger nodded. "Yes, of course. Don't worry, you are safe now. My name is Obi. I live in the village over there," he said, pointing toward the settlement she'd seen. "Can you walk? I'll help you. We have a healer or priestess who can tend to you." At the word priestess, Akune's eyes lit with hope, and she summoned a bit of strength. "Priestess, yes, please," she breathed. Obi gently helped her to her feet, supporting her with an arm. Akune leaned on him, her legs barely cooperating. "My name is Akune," she said softly as they began to walk. She realized too late that giving her real name might not be wise if news of the runaway queen spread. But in her state, she could hardly concoct a lie. Besides, the name Akune was not so uncommon. It might not immediately mark her. Obi didn't react to the name beyond a polite nod. "You are lucky I came to check my fish traps at dawn," he said kindly. "The river can be dangerous. What brought you out here alone, if I may ask?" Akune hesitated. The truth was unbelievable, and she was not ready to share it with a stranger, however kind, out in the open like this. It's a long story," she replied wearily. "I've been running all night. I had to get away to save my life." Hearing the fear in her tone, Obi tightened his supportive hold slightly. It's all right. You don't have to say more now. Let's get you to see the priestess. She's wise and will know how to help. Akune felt a wave of gratitude. She allowed herself to lean on Obi as they made their way slowly toward the village of Nshoko. With each step, the burden on her heart lightened just a bit. She was not alone anymore. In this foreign land, fate had sent a stranger with a gentle soul to aid her. The first rays of the sun peeked over the horizon, casting golden light on the path ahead. A new hope glimmered in Akune's chest, fragile but growing. Perhaps, with courage and a little help, she could truly break the darkest of curses. With Obi's help, Akune made it to the village of Nshoko just after sunrise. Nshoko was a small settlement of mud brick huts with thatched roofs, surrounded by fields of cassava and plantain. Villagers were starting their day, women stoking cooking fires, children toting water pots, a few men heading out with tools to the farms. They glanced curiously at Akune as Obi half carried, half guided her through the dusty paths. Drenched, barefoot, and draped in Obi's shawl, she certainly made an unusual sight. Obi led her directly toward the far end of the village, where a large baobab tree towered over the huts. Beside the tree stood a modest round hut painted with white symbols. A carved wooden figurine of a woman holding a bowl sat at the entrance, the sign of a priestess or healer. As they approached, an elderly man tending goats called out, "Obi, who is that with you? What happened?" Obi gave a quick wave but did not stop. "I found her by the river, Papa Ekwe. She needs the priestess," he answered. The old man nodded sagely and shooed his goats aside to let them pass. Reaching the hut, Obi gently lowered Akune to sit on a wooden stool by the entrance. "Wait here. I will let her know we've come," he said. But before he could even knock or announce himself, the raffia curtain over the doorway was pulled aside from within. A slender woman stepped out. Her skin was deep brown, her head was wrapped in a patterned cloth, and around her neck hung numerous strings of beads and cowries. Her eyes were sharp and seemed to look right through Akune. Akune instantly felt that this must be the priestess. She attempted to stand in respect, but her dizziness from exhaustion made her sway. Obi quickly steadied her. The priestess regarded Akune with a knowing gaze. "I heard you coming from a long way off," she said calmly. Her voice was low and musical. "The spirits have been restless all night." Obi bowed his head slightly. "Noble priestess, I found this young woman at dawn, half drowned by the river. She traveled all night from the direction of Obinikpa. She said she was running for her life." He paused, unsure how much to reveal since he himself did not know her full story. The priestess gave a small smile and nodded. "Thank you, Obi. You have done well to bring her." She stepped forward and gently lifted Akune's chin with surprisingly strong fingers, examining her face. "Such sorrow and fear in your eyes, child," she murmured. "And hope. You've come seeking me, haven't you?" Akune swallowed and managed to reply, "Yes, I believe you are the one who can help me. I need help," she managed to whisper, her throat raw. The stranger nodded, and Obi, respectfully, remained standing near the doorway. Akune eased down, grateful to rest. The priestess, whose name was Chiniwe, although she hadn't introduced herself yet, we can refer to her now, crouched by Akune and gently touched the coral necklace still hanging around the girl's neck. Akune had forgotten she was still wearing the king's necklace through all the chaos. Now, at the priestess's touch, she flinched instinctively. Chinwe's eyes narrowed slightly as she examined the necklace. "Ah," she murmured, almost to herself. "I see, a tie that binds." Akune looked at her with pleading eyes. "I suspect it's part of the curse. The king gave it to me." Her voice caught, and she finally uttered what she had not yet told anyone. "My husband, the king, he's the one who cursed me. He killed his previous wives through dark magic, and he means to do the same to me. Obi, hearing this revelation, drew a sharp breath of shock. The king? You mean King Omekagu of Obinikpa? He asked in disbelief. Akune nodded, tears gathering. Yes, I was Queen of Obinikpa. I fled on our wedding night after discovering what he truly is. Obi ran a hand over his head, stunned. He opened his mouth as if to ask more, then closed it, deciding to listen quietly. Priestess Chinwe seemed not at all astonished. She placed a comforting hand on Akune's shoulder. You were brave to escape, Akune. She addressed her by name, though Akune was sure she hadn't introduced herself yet. The priestess noticed her surprise and smiled faintly. The spirit whispered your name to me before you arrived. I have been awaiting you since the roosters crowed. Akune felt a chill of awe at those words. This woman truly did have insight beyond the ordinary. Without holding back, she began to recount her entire tale, voice shaking at first, then growing steadier. How she had been chosen as queen against her will, the strange events at the palace, finding Queen Ifeoma's hidden diary. She pulled the damp little book from her wrap to show the princess, the wedding and the gifted necklace, and finally the dreadful secret ritual she witnessed and her harrowing flight through the night. Chinwe and Obi listened in rapt silence. Obi occasionally murmured in horror or disbelief, especially hearing of Omekagu's sorcery and the death of the queens. The hut felt very still, as if even the air was eavesdropping on Akune's story. When Akune finished, she was breathing hard, as though she had run all over again. It felt both relieving and terrifying to speak it all out loud. She looked to the priestess with desperate hope. I know it sounds unbelievable, but every word is true. King Omekagu has used forbidden magic to cheat time and death at the cost of innocent lives. And now I might die if I stay bound to him. The priestess back in my kingdom, none dared speak against the king. Only you can help me, please. Priestess Chinwe's expression had grown grave. She closed her eyes for a moment, then reached into a basket and pulled out a small calabash gourd rattle. She shook it gently, producing a soft rattling rhythm, and began to hum under her breath. Obi watched quietly, recognizing that she was communing with the spirit world for guidance. After a minute, Chinwe opened her eyes, which now seemed to shine with a faint white light in the dimness. She spoke, but her voice was resonant, layered as if more than one voice spoke through her. The ancestors speak. A great darkness has nested in the heart of Obinikpa's throne. Fed by selfish blood and innocent lives, it grows fat and foul. The fourth wife escaped its jaws. She carries truth and light. The bond of death on her must be severed by fire and spirit, or the land will suffer further blight. Her head tilted as if listening to an unseen voice. Then she nodded, and the light in her eyes dimmed back to normal. Akune let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. The priestess had essentially confirmed it. The curse was real and bound to the king, the darkness in the throne, and she herself was the fourth wife who escaped and needed the bond severed by fire and spirit, likely meaning a ritual cleansing. Priestess Chinwe gently took Akune's hands in hers. My dear, your fears are confirmed. The king you married has become an instrument of evil. The cause is not an outside force, it emanates from him. He has tethered your life force to his own through that necklace and his blood magic. If nothing is done, he will indeed drain the very life from you as he did the others and grow stronger still. Despite expecting this, hearing it stated so plainly made Akune tremble. Obi stepped forward, anger and concern on his face. How could a leader do such a monstrous thing? Taking the lives of his own wives? It's unspeakable. We heard rumors in our border towns that the queens of Obinikpa kept dying, but none imagined it was the king's own doing. Chinwe frowned sadly. Power can corrupt a man's heart beyond reason. Omekagu feared age and weakness perhaps, and desired immortality. In secret, he gave himself over to dark practices. Each life he took prolonged his reign, but such pacts with darkness always carry a price. Akune, regaining some composure in the presence of these allies, asked urgently, "Can you break this bond? The voices, your vision, said by fire and spirit. What must we do?" The priestess pursed her lips thoughtfully. "We will perform a cleansing and severing ritual here tonight. Fire to cleanse, spirit to sever the ties. We must act quickly, for once bonded, the king will sense if his tether to you is threatened. It's best done before he has time to strengthen the connection or come for you." She glanced at the necklace again. "Removing this necklace alone won't break it. It's merely a conduit. The true bond is on your soul. But we will use the necklace in the ritual as it holds part of the curse's energy." Obi, eager to help, spoke up. "Tell me what you need, Priestess Chinwe. I can gather wood, water, anything." Chinwe appreciatively smiled at him. "Thank you, Obi. Yes, we will need a few things." She turned to a shelf and took down a clay jar. "First, fresh spring water. Fill this jar from the spring at the foot of the hill." Obi took the jar and nodded, rushing off without another word.